Hello, everyone. Welcome to Alternatives to Timeouts, Bribes, and Good Jobs that are more effective. My name is Tangi's Enrica Veloso, and I am so honored to be here sharing wisdom and more of a family philosophy that I believe in and learned throughout the past 15 years. And so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So here we are, alternatives to timeouts, bribes, and good jobs that are more effective. So what we're going to be covering today is the outline. I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to go over the course outline. I'm also going to be going over neuroscience and child development and the importance of this, and timeouts, bribes, and good jobs, and what the alternatives are. And so who am I? So I am a quantum coach. I am a single mama to my 15-year-old son. I also am an unschooler, and I am a spoken word artist, fire performer. I'm also a certified quantum coach for reparenting ancestral trauma. I'm really passionate about everything to do with conscious parenting and reparenting our inner child wounds. And I really specialize in supporting families really dive into self-love, conscious parenting, again, reparenting generational trauma through several different healing modalities. And also, I am very passionate about my spiritual path as well. I've been culminating in the past 22 years. I mean, it's been longer. Definitely been longer, but the last 22 years of being certified as a coach, as a healer, as a practitioner. And so really my mission is to co-create a new earth paradigm where we are consciously communicating with our children, our teens, with ourselves, with each other, and the planet. And I really am passionate about doing this through self-love, compassionate communication, mutual respect. It's not just about the hierarchy, do as I say. You know, who was raised in the era of do as I say, and children should be seen and not heard. And yeah, so I grew up in that era, and it's just not serving us as a humanity, as humankind, and as a society. And so I am here to share more than just tools. It's more of a family philosophy on how we can raise ourselves and our children more consciously, more connected, where it allows us to have more confidence within ourselves and know that we are worthy of love, worthy of receiving love and abundance. And I really truly feel a lot of that begins within our homes. A lot of it begins with how we are raising ourselves first and foremost, and our children. So that's a little bit about me. I also am so how I began on my journey. So I'm going to share a little bit about my story. So growing up, I was raised in a very strict household. I felt like I had to be the perfect child. I had to, or else I'd be punished or grounded. And so my mom, her ex-boyfriend at the time, he raised us, my mom and him and I, we were about 10 years old until I was about 17 years. So 7 years of my life, but like 10 years old to like 17, like that's a very, especially through the teen years, that's a very, I want to say like prolific. It's like a very important time for us to be able to like see how we are, the influence that we have basically. And so my mom, not my son, my mom's boyfriend, he used to actually, I was grounded all the time. And so he basically brainwashed my mom basically, and she allowed him to basically parent me because she was a workaholic, so she worked all the time. And so with him, he basically grounded me. Like I couldn't even have my nails had to be a certain length or else I was grounded. I had to have my hair perfect or else I was grounded. If I didn't make my lunch for school, I was grounded. If I didn't have good grades, I was grounded. So I had to be this perfect daughter, I had to be this perfect person in order to really, not get grounded, but I was grounded all the time. Like I was grounded one time, and I remember being grounded, and my friends, I had no idea that they were going to do this. They ended up TPing my house and egging his Porsche. Thankfully they only put one egg, but I was grounded, and they were so upset. My mom's ex-boyfriend was so upset he grounded me again. On top of that, I was like, what's going on? Didn't even know about it. So it was crazy. So yeah, so that really left an impression on me. And growing up, it just I wasn't able, I ended up starting to lie. I ended up starting to just go behind my mom's back. I would change differently. I mean, this some of this stuff is typical teenage stuff, yet it took a toll on me really being able to be my authentic self. And I ended up becoming a people pleaser. So that's what ended up happening was I just wanted to keep the peace in the home. And so and that actually, bled into my relationships growing up as an adult. And it really sculpted who I became as an adult. And so I vowed to myself that when I had a child, I would not become my mom or my mom's ex-boyfriend. I kept that vow. And I actually started, when I had my son, I really dived into conscious parenting. I had a home birth and a natural home birth at home, and I dived into like research on like the best of everything for my son. Like I didn't do plastic. I had like wooden toys. I didn't have him on media at the time until he was about 4 years old. So it's like I did cloth diapering. I did organic foods. I really just instilled this growth mindset of conscious parenting. Like I really dived into it. And then I actually founded an organization called Family Love Village. And I actually read this book called Connection Parenting by Pam Leo. And it was so profound to me. And I actually reached out to the author. She was sick at the time. So her partner, Carmine, responded to me. And I said, "Are there any workshops in LA?" And he said, "No, unfortunately, they're not." I said, "Well, how can I start my own? Because this message needs to be out there." And so he basically mentored me, and I started this whole workshop around the book. And I had some families that came, and at the time, our babies were not mobile yet, so they weren't able to crawl yet. So we were able to really get together each week, read the chapters, and then there were exercises at the end of the chapter. And so we were able to really connect and practice these tools and discuss these tools. And at the end of I would probably say it was like a book club workshop. I said, "How would you all like to continue supporting each other?" And I will get speakers, let's come together. We'll expand this to the community out in Los Angeles. That's where I was at the time. And so we created this movement, this conscious parenting movement. I had speakers that talked about conscious parenting, holistic wellness, sustainable living, and it was pretty amazing. It was amazing. And so I learned a lot through that. And that was the birth of Family Love Village. And then it ended up happening where I was interviewing all of these speakers and learning all of these tools that I created a book. So I wrote a book around conscious parenting. And then that became my mission. And so that's a little bit about my story. So I want to just get right into it. So this is what we're going to be learning today in this masterclass. Again, the importance of neuroscience and child development and what that means, and neuroplasticity, and the importance of being able to understand the different stages of child development and brain development. We're going to be talking about emotional intelligence. People could talk about IQ. Like that's a big thing about learning, having our children have their IQ and learning all the skills and going to school. But how about the emotional intelligence? I This is something really important to me with my son. As an unschooler, I've always encouraged him to do what lights him up, what he's passionate about. But I always said, well, the one thing that I always want to make sure that we're learning is growth mindset, self-love, and personal development. So we're also going to be talking about trauma and its effects on the family. We're going to be talking about timeouts, bribes, and good jobs. Do they work? And I know people are going to be like, "What? What do you mean good jobs?" Like that's a positive. I thought that was something positive. And when I share any of this family philosophy and this information with you, there's no judgment whatsoever. It's not here to make anyone feel bad. And it's really just to open the lens and open up our hearts to a different way of raising our children, our teens, and creating a deeper connection with them, more harmony, and to have more harmony in the home. And so we're going to be talking about alternatives that actually do work. And so neuroscience and brain development. And so with this, the children's brains, if you think about it, the human brain doesn't fully develop until age 25. And so when we think about, let's say, I don't even like to say like the terrible twos, I actually just say that they're still developing. Like when people, I actually feel like when we say the terrible twos, like the language that we speak, that we say to ourselves, to our children, it's really, we want to be mindful of what we're saying to our children, mindful of what we're saying to ourselves, because we are literally speaking magic spells. It's like that's what we say, they magic spells. We're actually speaking these spells into existence. So I truly feel like when we say that there is no, like this is society, and this is what I'm feeling from my perspective is when we say there's no manual for a child, for raising a child, for raising a baby, there's no manual. There absolutely is. There are so many resources. There's so many books out there. There's courses. There's YouTube, there's Google. We have the internet to be able to reach hundreds of people and to look, on social media, like, TikTok, Instagram. Like, if we just took the time to look to see what's out there, we absolutely do have resources. So I'd like to debunk that limiting belief around there's no manual to raise children. So let's get that out of our vocabulary. And let's also understand, like I was saying, like when we say like the terrible twos, when we say, oh, our child's being manipulative, when we're saying these things, we're speaking into existence again. So I'd like to shift that mindset, reframe it. So it's just them developing. Like when our children are developing, when our teens are developing, I have a 15-year-old son right now. Even though it's like, oh, he should know better, he's 15. No, he is still developing. Like being able, like our emotional, it's important to understand the emotions and to understand that they're not bad also. Our emotions are not bad. Anger is not a bad thing. These are just these feelings and emotions that we're expressing. And so this is what I wanted to share a little bit about is like just having the compassion to really understand like when they're having big feelings. I like to call them big feelings. I don't like to call it like melting down or the terrible twos. When they're just having these big feelings that are coming up, it's like just to remind ourselves that their brain is still developing. And I love this quote by Michelangelo. And he says, "A man paints with his brains and not with his hands. And if he cannot have his brains clear, he will come to grief." And what I feel with this quote, what this means to me is like when our children can't have, when they're not in the right mind frame, when they are having big feelings, it is challenging for them to be able to cooperate. I'd also like to take this out of our vocabulary too is their behavior. Oh, they're behaving so well. Oh, it's like nails on the chalkboard for me. I remember there was one time that my son was, I think he was about 5. 5 or 6, and we went on a cruise with my family. And at the time, there were no other kids for him to play with. He was exhausted. It was our first cruise. We were going to all these different places and historical locations to check out, and all different tours. And so a little kid doesn't want to do that. And then so he didn't want to take pictures either. He was tired. He was hungry. He was like, he was done with this. Like there was no other friends to play with. And I just remember my family being really upset that he didn't want to take the picture. And they're like, oh, he's just a poor sport. And I'm like, well, no, I actually don't want to force my son to take a picture if he's not feeling like taking a picture. And I had so much, they gave me so much grief around this, just around the conscious parenting, because it's different. Conscious parenting, we're used to traditional parenting, which I'm going to be going into. A lot of people are more used to this traditional coercive parenting style. And again, that just didn't work for me. I knew I desired something different. Because I knew I didn't have a great relationship with my mom. I didn't have a great relationship with my mom until 21, when I actually shared deeply, and we had a heart to heart. And that moment we were able to start healing. But it took years from that, like from being a child till 21, like I did not want to have a disconnected relationship with my son. And so then about, I think like 3 years later, we went on another cruise. He was older, right? And then there were friends for him to play with. He had his cousins. And so I just remember my family telling me, they're like, oh my gosh, we just love how he's behaving so well. I started having all these family members coming up to me and just like, oh, he's so polite. He's so thoughtful, and he's so funny and witty, and he's behaving so well. And I was just like, oh, like the this limiting belief around our children's behavior and how they behave. It's really when they are not in a cooperative, when they're not being able to behave and cooperate. A lot of times we're not looking with the underlying unmet need. And so usually when they're having these big feelings, they are needing help. That is their cry for help. So instead of getting upset and impatient and thinking that they're misbehaving, this is the invitation for us to have compassion with their development. Where are they at in their development, their brain development? And so it's really, I feel it behooves us to really research about it, research brain development, research the neuroscience. And when people say, again, going back to, there's no manual for raising children, there absolutely is. There's lots of books and resources out there on neuroscience and brain development and child development. So I wanted to share some information. So prefrontal cortex. So the prefrontal cortex, this is located in the front part of the frontal lobe. This acts as like the CEO of the brain. Its function controls planning, organization, for decision making, your personality expression, and it also moderates our social behavior with others around us. So the limbic system, this is composed of the structures in the brain that deal with three key functions. This deals with the emotions, memories, and arousal, like stimulation, like computers, phones, stimulation, anything that has to do with stimulation, right? And so this is the limbic system. And so I'd like to share some fun brain facts. So babies, did you know that babies are born with 1 million neurons in their brain? Neurons are not yet connected at birth. So brain development is all about growing the connections and circuits between the neurons. Now, how many neurons get connected and how strong the circuits get wired has to do with emotions, the limbic system. And they say around age 3, the weakest connections dissipate, while a connection that is repeated over and over again in the early years, this remains permanent. So this is why they say like 0 to 7 years old is such a important stage of our children's development, because that's where we actually anchor in certain experiences in in our lives. So for instance, if there's a good experience, bonding through touch, attachment parenting, just connecting, they experience it and they remember that. And then these neurons are getting connected and remembering all this at just the same as a bad experience. So witnessing the parents constantly fighting, that could be something that they remember, and it connects in the neurons. And so this is something that then when they go out into the world and then they see, then this is the piece about where things and cycles, reparenting cycles can keep repeating itself. And so this is why I'm really passionate about healing, transmuting the ancestral trauma. So the four basic emotions, there's joy, sadness, anger, and fear. This that activates specifically in the brain. And again, this is the piece remembering that the brain doesn't fully develop until around 25. So I just like to remind us, like, if we can just like have that as a reminder, maybe putting it on a sticky note if you have to, making it part of your mantra whenever you get upset and you're getting frustrated. It's like, oh, you're having that frustration or you get triggered. And I just actually want to say something. Whenever we get triggered, it's really not about the other person. It's really never about the other person, our child, our spouse, our boss, the person driving in traffic. When we get triggered, it's usually a reflection of where we didn't feel appreciated, accepted, acknowledged, loved, heard, and seen growing up. And so this is why it's so important to be able to learn tools to regulate our own nervous systems. And so that's why, with that could be a tool, is just having a sticky note, or having it somewhere like the brain doesn't fully develop until 25. Okay, the brain doesn't fully develop until they're 25. And so it's just reminding yourself that, and to have that compassion for the inner child in ourselves and our children. So the on and off switch to learning. The on and off switch to learning, this is where our emotions are like an on and off switch. Just think of like the light switch. So when a child is able to feel joy, when they have reassurance, when they're able to connect, they are able to learn. They can create more freely, hence their switch is on. Now, when a child is upset, they're having big feelings, when they're feeling threatened or they lose that sense of connection, it's really hard for them to focus, hence their switch is off. And so that is why when it's really important when they're having big feelings, whether it is a young child or a teen, when they are going through some big feelings. Oops, hold on 1 second. I gotta find I don't know what happened to my screen. I got something that just popped up. Hold on 1 second. I gotta find it. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So sorry about that. So whether our child or teen is having big feelings, for us to be able to like talk to them, for them to understand, for them to cooperate, for them to be open and expansive, to really receive the information that we're trying to tell them. So it's best when they're going through the big feelings just to really be there for them, to connect with them. And if you've got a teen, giving them their space and yourself some space, right? And being able to find tools that can support regulating the nervous system. Since my son was probably around 4 years old, I've been teaching him about growth mindset, like I mentioned earlier. And so I've been teaching him tools to help self-regulate, breath work. There's actually an easy one where you can just like breathe in for a 4 count, hold for 4 count, breathe out for 4 count, hold for 4 count. Let's do that right now. Let's breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold. Breathe in for a 4 count, hold, out for a 4 count, hold. Mm. So simple tools like that to help regulate the nervous system. Of course, if they're younger, it's just like holding them connecting with them, getting down to their level. And like with my son now, just like I give him tools that support him with the breath work. There's a really great one that I learned from Gabby, and that's like the DNA, RNA, the magic button. So this is a great one. I don't know if anybody has learned this in any of the previous classes with Gabby or anyone else, but this is an amazing tool. So funny, I wasn't even going to go into the tools right now, but I'm just willing to share some of them. So but this is a great way. Like you just lift up. So you just put your thumb right here in the middle, you're like your third eye, the bridge of your nose, and you just lift up. And you breathe and breathe out. Breathing in again and release. So it's another great tool. So supporting them through when and recognizing when their switch is on, when they're able to listen, when they're able to receive the information, when they're able to connect, and also notice when their switch is off. So the importance of emotional intelligence. Who here has seen Inside Out? Put a one below if you've seen Inside Out before. This is an amazing movie. I love this movie. I actually just watched the second one recently. But this is, I was talking about like, we focus so much as parents, as society, uh, in general, focus so much on the education, on their schooling, on the testing, on everything. And I feel like it's really important. Yes, learning skill sets, education is important, but I truly feel like the emotional intelligence, the EQ versus over IQ is way more important. Being able, and that's the reason why I've raised my son around having growth mindset and personal development and self-love, doing the inner work, and having these tools to share with him to self-regulate his nervous system. Because I truly feel that's way more important with our self-love, on knowing our worthiness, knowing that we are good enough, way more important than what we learn and memorize in school, right? And so learning about the different emotions, embracing the different emotions. I never told my son to never cry, but we have been raised in a society where our feelings are pushed down. They're shut down and they're pushed down. And there's actually one where I truly feel where it starts to happen is when we invalidate our children, and we invalidate their feelings, even when they fall. Like when you see a child fall or a toddler fall, I know you're not wanting them to experience, not you, but us in general, humanity in general, doesn't want to experience them in pain. And so then, so have you ever seen the parents that have said, you're okay, you're fine, it's all good, you're okay. And really, that's the beginning stages of invalidating our children's experience. And so then what ends up happening is they're pushing down their feelings. There's a really great documentary called The Mask You Live In, and it shares how we've been raising our boys into men and the whole detrimental effects of big boys don't cry, even with big girls don't cry. Right. And so it's like allowing our children to feel, to allow them. And I never told my son never to cry. And I always told him it's okay to release it. It's okay. It's healthy to release what needs to move through. So if you don't know what emotional intelligence is, it's the ability to have self-awareness, self-regulation. That's what allows us to be motivated, allows us to have more empathy, allows us to have more social skills. So it's important to guide our children in finding ways to identify their feelings and be able to regulate their impulses in a healthy and productive way. So a few suggestions is accept your child's emotions, accept your teen's emotions. You know, when your teen is saying, expressing how they're feeling, and then we go and say, oh, you're just exaggerating. I've had that happen to me so many times as a teen. You exaggerate all the time. And it's just like, but that's invalidating their experience. So instead of invalidating their experience, you can say, hmm, when you see that they're upset, you can say that must have been frustrating. You want to help your child label the emotion. For example, I'm noticing you're upset. You also want to encourage them to express their feelings by asking, how did that make you feel? When you bring it back to your child's experience, when you bring it back to how they're feeling, this is the important piece of knowing how they feel, not putting upon our opinions and judgments onto them, but how did they feel? So let's raise children who won't have to recover from their childhoods. This is by Pam Leo. I love this. It's like why not learn these tools? Why not learn this family philosophy, raising children who don't won't have to recover from their childhoods? So learning the skill sets, learning a family philosophy that embraces, that honors and focuses on connection, compassionate communication, having mutual respect, and also setting healthy boundaries. So it's not conscious parenting isn't permissive parenting. At least for what I'm sharing here, it's not permissive parenting. It is setting healthy boundaries, absolutely, but doing it in a way that everyone feels heard, everyone feels seen. So the trauma and its effects on the family dynamic. So more than 2/3 of today's children have experienced and or witnessed a traumatic event by age 16. And it doesn't mean that trauma has to be something where they were abused as a child. Trauma comes in all different forms. It can even be a nature deficit where our children are glued to their computers or their games or their iPads and not getting out in enough nature. That could even be a trauma response. Being in a classroom for 8 hours a day can be traumatic for some children because they can't sit there. I knew for a very young age, my son was very, very energetic as a kid. So I knew, I mean, as a baby, as a matter of fact, but I just knew I wanted to homeschool him and now I unschool him. So I knew that he could not sit there for 8 hours a day. Like that could even be traumatic. And again, when I'm sharing all this information, it's not to make anyone feel guilty. There's no shame. It's just like these are some of the statistics, and I'm just sharing some observations. So, and if trauma is repeated, or if there's extreme amounts of stress that occurs, this excess cortisol can get released into the body. And this large amount of cortisol can actually have negative effects on the brain. And it can actually damage the neurons in the brain, like I was talking about earlier with neuroplasticity and brain development. And so this is why it's so important to learn different tools. Like I was sharing a little bit on regulating the nervous system. So, statistics show that improvement with trauma when children or teens are able to tap into creative tools and help alleviate stress. Some of the creative ways to help a child through trauma, grief, depression, loss, anxiety is through art. It's through music, storytelling, creative writing, poetry, dance, just moving their bodies, getting out in nature. When I started writing poetry when I was 9 years old, and I started dancing when I was 9. And it really helped me having a creative outlet to release all the trauma that I was experiencing with my mom's ex-boyfriend when he was raising me, when I was being punished all the time, when I was being grounded all the time, when I was verbally abused by my mom's ex-boyfriend. And so I had these outlets. So it's supporting them, supporting your children, supporting your teens on what lights them up. It's not about what we want them to do in this scenario when it comes to finding ways to release the trauma, when it comes to finding ways to support them in what they love to do. And so the question here is, can you remember who you were before the world told you who you should be? Really sit with that. Can you really remember that time where you just felt invincible? I remember there was one time when I think I was 3 years old, and I was on top of this picnic table and we were at a family outing with all the family. And I just, I don't really remember a lot of it. I was 3, but there's a picture of me and there's a picture of my Uncle Pat. And I just love this memory. But I kind of remember kind of like the feeling of like just feeling invincible. And I started running from one end of the picnic table to the end, and I wanted to fly. And then thankfully, my mom turned around. She said, Pat, which is her brother, Pat, turn around. And there's a picture, and he looks and he's all, and he catches me. This is back in the 70s. I think it's like 1976, something like that. But that feeling of feeling invincible, feeling like you could do whatever you desire. Like, can you remember that moment before we were told we can't do something? Before we were told to have all these limiting beliefs that we were programmed in. So just as important to help, it's important to help children heal their trauma. It's imperative for us adults to heal our past trauma. If we're not able to heal our past hurts, they're going to continue to trickle onto our children and their children's children and and that's like the generational trauma, right? The ancestral trauma I was talking about. And so it's really important for us to be able to learn tools to help self-regulate our nervous systems. That's why I was sharing like the breath work earlier. So this is one of my son's mentors when he was younger. This one guy, Chris Moraski, he used to take all the children. I think my son was probably like four on until like he was 6 or 7. And he basically did these nature, he taught them all about nature, and he basically taught them how to like skill sets, nature skill sets, like survival skill sets, how to make soap out of certain out of nature, not out of nature, but certain soaps, or you know what I mean, like learning how to whittle a spoon, that kind of stuff. So whatever traumas are not dealt with in childhood continue through adulthood, then through old age, and finally to death. Traumas that are not dealt with eventually are physically expressed as illness or injury via a lower vitality. It is no coincidence that autoimmune diseases are steadily rising, partly due to this. You know, a lot of times when we're having health issues, it's all interconnected. Whatever we're going through emotionally can come out through our physical illnesses. And so that's why it's really important to really look at, like, when we're going through some injuries and we have something, we're not feeling good. It's like looking at that, like what's underneath that, what trauma, what stress are we not dealing with that we're pushing down? And so when you pass your traumas on to your children, the way this happens is fascinating and actually quite beautiful. Your child intuitively senses your traumas and unconsciously finds ways to engage your issues. We call this pushing your buttons. Nobody can push your buttons like your own child, right? This is the gift. Remember, you can only let go of your limitations when your stuff is up. Children are born to raise up their parents, not the other way around. So this is the gift. So whenever, and I was talking about earlier, is like when we get triggered, again, our children, our teens, our reflection showing us the places where we didn't feel loved, accepted, appreciated, acknowledged, seen, heard growing up. That's when we get triggered. It's really never about the other person. It's usually our own stuff that's coming up. They're coming up in the form for us. And that's the gift for us to see where we can transmute that trauma, transmute those inner child wounds. So timeouts, bribes, and good jobs. Do they work? Thinking of your child as behaving badly disposes you to think of punishment. Thinking your child as struggling to handle something difficult encourages to help them through their distress. Remember, I was saying it's a cry for help. When they're going through these big feelings, it's like looking under the underlying unmet need beyond that behavior. So traditional parenting styles, so authoritarian parenting, this is strict discipline. This is a relationship of power over, which tends to be manipulative and fear-based in motives while relying on bribes, rewards, and punishments. And this is what I was talking about, like when I was saying, children, when we say children are manipulative, like we're being mindful of what we're saying and speaking into existence. A lot of times when we say they're being manipulative, like who's teaching them that? How are they being modeled this? How are we? And again, when I share this information, it's not to shame anybody. It's not a good or bad thing. It's just an observation on traditional coercive parenting. Permissive parenting is the polar opposite. It's where authoritarian parenting is about power over. Permissive parenting is misappropriate power that shifts the focus on the parent rather than the child. So it places the child responsibility for the emotional health of the parent with their wounds growing up. And so that's why it's so important. It's imperative to do our inner work, right? And so coercive control, an attempt to influence the child while taking advantage of the child's desire for love and approval. So examples of coercion, it's blaming and guilting them. Oh, you did, when you would point the finger, you didn't do this or you did this, making them feel guilty, shaming them, withdrawing your love, withdrawing like not, that the naughty chair, like go to the naughty chair. That is an example of withdrawing our love because we're upset at them. And so in order for them to be good, then they got to go to the naughty chair to learn their lesson. So teasing in degrading ways, sarcasm or condescending remarks, and validating feelings, thoughts, or ideas are just some of the examples of coercion. So if controlling another human being is the goal of parenting, then force is necessary. Fear, intimidation, threats, power plays, and physical pain are the means of control. But if growing healthy humans is the goal, then building trust, relationships, encouraging, guiding, leading, teaching, and communicating are the tools for success. L.R. Nas, she's amazing. If you go on and just do Google, I love all of her quotes. I love all of the resources with her on conscious parenting. So rewards and punishments are another form of coercion. So I'm going to share a couple examples. So like reward, if you eat all your veggies, you can have dessert. That's the first example, using bribery in order for your child to get the reward. So example 2 is punishment. So one is you get a reward. And I'd like to speak to this, like, what are we teaching our children? Like, if you eat all your veggies, you can have dessert. Like, if we think about that, like, what is that teaching with how they think of food? It's a reward. And when you think about like when there's binge eating, like when you're going through trauma and you're stressed out or you're going through and you're frustrated or depressed, like there's something just to think about, right? And so example 2 is punishment. If you don't eat all your veggies, you won't get dessert. So it's again taking something away. The second one puts the child in a position where he's forced to do something in order to get something. So the solutions, what are the solutions to bribes and rewards for kids? It's giving them choices, giving your teens choices. Give your child options. This will help your child feel empowered by their decisions and accomplishments rather than being driven by what they can bribe or get out of you. I remember when my son was a baby and in my capoeira class, one of the dads, his son was 4, and he wanted to have his son take a picture with my son. And his son didn't want to. He's like, I don't want to. And then his dad was like, okay, come on, I'll give you a quarter. And then his dad came back was like 50 cents. So, you think, okay, that's not a big deal. But then when you think about it, it's like he's negotiating already at 4 years old. Like who's teaching him how to be manipulative to get his way? Like his dad was by showing like the bribe, like, okay, if you do this, come on, you'll get this. So I thought that was very interesting, even at 4 years old, like the stakes get bigger, get more when we're teaching this type of coercion and bribing. So while making dinner, you can offer a couple of options for vegetables to see which one your child would like to eat. When you give choices, when you give your children choices, when you give your teens choices, it can help them feel a part of the process. Another example of offering choices. One, you can either brush so this is something that, when you have a younger child, they don't want to brush their teeth. Well, you can either brush your teeth before we read a bedtime story, or you can do it after we read. Which one do you want to do? Do you want to put your shoes on after your breakfast or before eating? So it's giving choices for your children. Now, here's another example for bribes and coercion and rewards. that just don't work is time out. This is where go to your room and think about what you did to your sister, or go to the naughty chair. Like, really, what that's doing is instilling disconnection. It's really like they're feeling like they're not good enough is really what happens. They're feeling bad. They're not good enough. And really what's actually happening is not usually a lot of the time, if they're going out, you're being sent to their room or they're in the naughty chair, they're not thinking of what they did bad. They're either, especially if they're siblings, they're either thinking of how they're going to get even, or they're thinking about how not to get caught again. That was me. Again, sharing my story of grounded. I was grounded. I feel like I don't even really remember a moment where I wasn't grounded. Maybe a couple of weekends that I went to a couple of parties in high school, but I just remember always, always being grounded. And it didn't serve. It didn't serve. It just created this disconnection between my mom and I and my mom's ex-boyfriend. It created this experience for myself not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy. And it created this where I became gotten to this fawn response. So there's fight, flight, and with the trauma response, there's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And fawn is a people pleaser. I became a people pleaser. I just wanted the peace in the home. I had to be this perfect little girl, or else I'd be grounded. And so that ended up bleeding into my relationships, a lot of toxic relationships. So according to research, timeouts actually damage the child's psyche and truthfully doesn't actually change the child's behavior. So this is a great quote by Cheryl Richardson. Listen, people start to heal the moment they feel heard. This is allowing our children, allowing our teens to have a place where they feel heard, a safe space where they feel heard. There's a great tool that I want to share that could be supportive is having a family meeting where anybody can call the meeting. Like the youngest child can call the meeting or the teen could call the meeting, but where everyone comes together and where everyone can just, this is a Native American tradition of having a talking stick. Like even having like one of my clients, I said, with her or her two daughters, I said, hey, why don't you guys create like have it be an arts and crafts day? Make it fun. Make them a part of the experience where you guys find a talking stick, or maybe it's a rock or a crystal or something that symbolizes. And what happens with the talking stick when you have the family meeting, whoever is talking has the talking stick and everyone else holds space and just listens until they are done. And then the next person. It's probably good to have a timer so that they aren't going over for like an hour. But that's a great tool that you can do in order to really hold the space for everyone to listen and for everyone to feel heard. It's all I ever desired growing up was just to feel heard and to feel seen. But that wasn't the case in my home, unfortunately. And that's a lot of the cases, with this traditional coercive parenting style. And so that's why so important for us to learn a philosophy. That's why it's not about tools. It's really a philosophy where we are really raising ourselves and our children and more connected to ourselves, more connected to each other, more connected to the planet. So the solution for feeling heard is a time in. So instead of time out, it's having a time in. You know, most of the time we feel isolated. The child feel isolated by themselves. So having a time in allows the child or the teen to offload their feelings while we attentively listen to the child, while we attentively listen to the teen. Also, another great tool is reflective listening. So this is kind of a checking out process to determine that both you and the speaker understand what he or she is trying to say. So whoever's speaking. So the reflection allows the other to verify that you are hearing accurately. In order for this process to be effective, you must be able to perceive accurately what the other is experiencing and communicating. So this is all about being present. So it's kind of like paraphrasing. So it's like you're just saying, okay, so what I heard you say. So that's a great phrase is, So what I'm hearing you say is dot, dot, dot. And that's a great way. So then that way they feel heard and they feel like, ah, you understand. I'm hearing you say this. So we have an epidemic with the word good. And I know good jobs, we think, what? Why is good job a bad thing? Right? It's not a bad thing. It's just an observation. And there's actually a woman, Ruth Beaglehole, shares this. We have an epidemic with the word good. For instance, good job, good boy, good girl, good sitting, good eating, good climbing up the stairs. What we're doing is making our children become addicted to intrinsic rewards. They become addicted to that praise. Have you ever seen like it becomes an automatic, it's like an automatic thing that parents say, oh, good job. And a lot of times I've seen parents like at the park, they're like, oh yeah, good job. And they're just looking at their phone or they're talking to friends, oh yeah, good job. And so what ends up happening is these children are just like they're wanting that approval outside of themselves, when really it's about accepting and approving of themselves within, knowing and trusting that they are good enough within. So instead of rewards, move towards a celebration through an observation. Wow, you climbed up the stairs. That's an observation. Try to imagine what the experience means for the child rather than taking it away and making it through us, through our filter with the good job. And when we say good job, what we're really saying is, I like that. And it becomes conditional parenting. If you do what I like, I praise you. If you don't do what I like, there could be silence or things taken away. So alternatives to saying good job. So what are they? So people are like, well, what do I say then? You can show appreciation. Examples are, thank you for cleaning up your toys. It makes it easier for all of us to walk in the room. So it's like showing your appreciation and also describing why you're so appreciative. When you go deeper with the why, not just thank you, thanks for cleaning up, but when you say thank you for cleaning up, that way I don't stub on my, I don't walk on your Legos, something like that, right? Thank you for helping me cook. I appreciate all the love you put into food. Like right now, I'm doing this class and my teen son is cooking dinner right now for us. So it's like, I'm going to go downstairs and be like, oh my gosh, thank you so much, babe. I love you so much. Thank you for doing this for me and for cooking this amazing meal. He's cooking some shrimp and rice and sauteed veggies. But because it allowed me to really be present and do this class with everyone. That's a great way to show appreciation. Another way is be an observer. You colored the picture with so many pretty colors. You've been working hard on the math problems. You slid down the slide all by yourself. It's just being observant, being inquisitive. Example is, you climbed all the way up the hill. How did that make you feel? So again, it brings it back to their experience versus our own filter. And then celebrate. Example is, wow, you did it. So it's different from good job. It's just showing like, woohoo, you did it. And encourage, also the last one is encourage compassion. So this is a great example of like showing, modeling compassion with them. Like, look at Cindy's smile. She looks happy that you are sharing the ball with her. Or do you see Bobby's body language? It looks like he's feeling uncomfortable with how you are holding him. So those are just examples that you can do instead of good job. And so this is one of my quotes. Parenting through connection may seem like it takes longer, but when you look at the overall picture, it takes just as much time to connect with your child and find strategies that elevate towards empathy, trust, and loving cooperation as it would if you were to try and find ways to repair the damage that tend to usually follow the use of bribes, coercion, and punishments. So it takes just the same amount of time. We think, oh gosh, conscious parenting, we're in this world of like quick fix parenting, like quick fix. Everything's like it's like that instant gratification, right? But it takes the same amount of time to connect that it does to repair the damage. I even think it takes longer to repair the damage. Many, many years of adults that are going through therapy that, are maybe not even going through therapy and are going through depression and don't even know how to handle or even know what to do to support themselves. And so then they go into the victim role because they don't know any other way. So it's like, this is the question for ourselves, like, what can we do? What can we do to get out? I like to call it like the old traditional parenting matrix. Again, we do have a manual. We do have ways to raise our children, to raise our teens. There's so many resources out there. And it's just a matter of taking radical responsibility to look, to radical responsibility to also do the inner work, to heal the ancestral trauma. I'm actually gonna be that's gonna be my next workshop, masterclass is tools on healing the ancestral trauma, the generational trauma. And so we're coming up on the hour. And we're pretty much done here with what I want to share with alternatives to timeouts, bribes, and good jobs that are more effective. And if you'd like to learn more about my quantum coaching and my offers or anything that I do with healing ancestral trauma and conscious parenting, let me know. Reach out to the admin for Magic School for Teens and Kids. Reach out to them to get my information. This has been wonderful being here with all of you. I appreciate all of you. And if you have any questions, please, please, reach out to them to reach out to me. If you have any questions, we can go into the Facebook group for Magic School for Teens and Kids and ask your questions there. And I'm more than happy to support. And this is part of my mission and vision is really to to create a new earth paradigm for all of us, to raise our children, to raise ourselves more consciously so that we can have more harmony in the home and then have more harmony in the world, really, right? And have more harmony within ourselves. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, night, wherever you are at, and take care. Bye.